All right, sounds like it's time, and we've got a busy agenda today, so I think we'll get started. I don't have my mallet today, but I call the meeting to order. Let's start with a roll call. Introductions. Maybe we'll start with Brian, and we'll come down this table.
Smith, board member.
Danna Kemp, Trails Committee.
Bob Freshman, Trails Committee.
Dennis Wiley, Trails Committee.
Sarah Downing, Trails Committee.
Oh, I didn't turn it on. Yeah.
And in our audience, would you like to introduce yourself? You would not, okay? All right, I think that's everyone.
I know Lauren's on her way.
And Lauren is on her way, okay.
Just a reminder for everyone, the microphones need to be around 3 to 5 inches from your mouth.
Okay. We're going to have an addition to the agenda. Jim McMasters is going to briefly give us a little introduction to the bypass trail, and there's some literature here in front of you that will give us some more information. And I think on our tour and maybe the next meeting, we'll get even more into that discussion. With that, you've all seen the minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes have been approved. Jim, you're up.
Okay, so I'm Jim McMaster, and most of you know me. I've been with the Park District for, 43 years now. 38 of those years was the park supervisor. And my goal as a supervisor and doing a lot of the projects was to make our communities, Dundee, Newberg, and part of the county that are within our district more livable. And so I think that we've accomplished a lot of that with things such as all of our parks that we have now, the Aquatic Center, the Cultural Center, Riley property, skate parks, and the list goes on and on and on. So you've got a pretty nice livable area, but I really felt that our walking through it within the community has been scarce, to say a few words. So back many, many years ago, when they started working on the bypass for vehicles, we talked to ODOT about having a bypass for bike ped, basically. So a bike ped trail that leads from Newberg all the way to Dundee along the bypass in the ODOT right-of-way. So what I've given to you, and I'm sorry, this is just kind of a taste. I have another meeting I get to go to, but we're going to have a better explanation and possibly a trip out to some of the areas in the near future. But what I've given you is kind of a drawing of where the bypass trail is supposed to be. And of course, with any kind of trail or any kind of project, there's always hiccups. But the hiccup that I've digested that's really nice is that ODOT is giving us, to jumpstart the project, $1.8 million on the first phase, which is the bridge over Chehalem Creek. And so, Hess Creek. So that is in the works right now. We have a contractor that has been hired to do that, but we've had some things that have stalled us going forward, and we're working on those things. And that'll be explained later. But again, being able to walk without cars around you, without cars pulling out of driveways, I think you know what I mean, is going to be an amazing attribute to our community, to our park district and its citizens. And I'm just going to leave you with this. I have a board member here, a new board member, that I took for a ride and showed him all the different parks and everything when he was elected. And so when we were going down by the development there, by where the bypass trail is going to go, I just stopped a passerby. I didn't know who it was. And I asked them, what do you think if we had a trail that went from here to Dundee along the bypass? And they said, that would be the greatest thing ever for my kids to walk my dog safely, to do all those type of things. So, that's pretty much the mantra from the general public who we represent. So with that said, take a look at that, read that at your leisure, and we will see you again. Thank you so much.
One question,
Oh, you have a question?
just one.
You have a question?
So you talked about a bridge. So is it the current bridge for the
It's a bridge that'll be
vehicles?
built.
That'll be, a new bridge will be built for
Yes.
pedestrians?
That's what that 1.8
And that's what
million
the, okay.
initially goes towards, and ODOT has said, we are going to give you more down the road, because in theory, state law says on any new construction of highways, you're supposed to have a bike ped as part of
Yeah.
that. Well,
They did it.
ODOT's trying to make up for that, I think a little bit.
Okay.
So there you
And
go.
is that in design? Has it been designed, or is it going to?
Say that, I'm sorry again?
Has it been designed?
The bridge?
Yeah.
The bridge has been designed, that part of the project has been
Okay.
designed. But it hasn't totally been accepted yet, so
So
we're
that's
working on that.
construction dollars, that
Chair,
one
can you
point.
entertain one more questions?
One more question?
Can you entertain that? Jim, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I'm trying to. I've got, my ears for some reason are plugged today, so I'm going, so I'm trying.
So Jim, this is the trail that the money that you got, are you planning to plant more trees along the trails, or just going to be a pavement for people to walk?
Are we, I would, I'd rather not get into that right now. I really
Okay.
want to make a good presentation later on, so we'll do it all at one time, which would be better, I think. Because you guys have a busy schedule. Not that I want to push you off on this, but I kind of want to have Casey here too on this.
So the next meeting?
Yeah,
On this map, where is the first bridge roughly located? If you-
the first bridge, if you look at the, let me show you really quick. So the first bridge, you know where the bypass, the first bridge is right in here. There's a, Friends Park is over here. This is where the first bridge is. And then down here is Ewing Young Park. And we'll be able to have a connection from Friends Park to this new trail, and also from Ewing Young Park to this new trail, as well as other areas possibly towards Dundee. But again,
Wow,
I will, you probably can't hear me now.
okay.
But we will cover this in depth. I just wanted to, I heard people were asking, and so I
Yeah.
thought it was important that I give you a little bit of a teaser information, and then we'll give you more thorough explanation when you have more time.
Next meeting perhaps?
If that's what you wish, that's what we'll do.
That'd be good.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry I can't stay for the rest of your meeting. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank Jim.
Okay, at our last couple of meetings, we were talking about a couple things that I discovered the last committee has done quite a bit of work on. And one of those was to host a National Trails Day. And I asked Matt Dolphin, who was involved with that project, to come and give us a little information, insight on how that worked for them, how they recruited, and would give us kind of a leg up to start on our own. So Matt.
All right. I'm excited to be here, but I'm more excited that you're here. It's great to see some new trail committee members taking on you've heard from Jim about the bypass a little bit. You've heard about some of the other parks and trails that we have that are in the works. It's an exciting time to be part of this committee. I'm a little envious, but I just wanted to just show some appreciation and thanks that you've stepped up to the plate to take this on. Very much appreciate that. So I'll dive right in. We've organized a couple of different trail maintenance events over the past couple years. The largest of those was up at Riley Park. We had about 85, maybe close to 100. We didn't get quite everybody counted up, but we had 85 people register and got checked in on the sign-in sheet. So that was a pretty big event up there. We've also done a couple smaller ones with 6 to 8 people. And it really just depends on what work you're planning on doing. 85 people is great for going through with some loppers and clipping out blackberries and brush and trimming the trail back. If you've got something a little more technical, like maybe signage, you probably don't want 85 people fighting over that one orange post pounder that we'll talk about later in the meeting to get to work that. So a smaller group can be just as advantageous as a larger one, and it really just depends on the work and also who you're able to draw. So I think the agenda says lessons learned. I think the big lesson learned is that the community really does value trails, and they show that by showing up to a committee meeting like you all have and signing up for that, but also getting their hands a little dirty and helping out on the trails. So that would be the big lesson. I guess I would turn it around to you. I don't know your level of expertise in organizing trail maintenance events, so I'll just let you shoot and ask me whatever questions you have, and I'll try my best to answer those.
The first question is, so how did you work with the district staff on this? Was it a hand-in-hand thing, or?
Sure. Yeah, Brian, as the park supervisor, was one of our main contacts. So he can tell you what work needs to be done, where you may need some extra attention on some trails. And I'll talk about this a little later in my next kind of section. The park staff really is the professionals here. They're gonna know best what needs to be done. The board really sets a general policy, and then the park staff takes care of those details. So I would lean on them. Brian specifically. Also, Kat Ricker was very helpful in getting the word out, getting an announcement up on the website and things like that. So those would probably be your 2 point people. Yeah, Bob.
Couple of questions, Matt. What dates or what time of the year did you do the work parties?
Sure, that's a good question. So what days of the year are best? It again depends on what you're working on. When we're talking about driving posts, you don't want to do that when the ground is super hard in the middle of the summer. Interestingly, you don't want to do them when they're also super soggy and wet, because both can be difficult to drive those signs in. So you want to find some of the shoulder seasons where things have dried off a little bit. Poison oak up at Riley was an issue. We did some things later on in the year. That happens to be the point where it's most potent, is toward the end of the year, but it's also pretty visible. So depending on your allergic reaction, that may be a great time, or it may be a time you want to not be a part of that crew. So again, it really kind of depends. I think your idea of doing a National Trail Day event, they've got some great resources on their website that can help you with organizing that. And if you contact them in advance, they may even send you some things to help promote that, stickers and things like that to thank your volunteers. So I would encourage you to do that. I believe that's in June. Other days, Arbor Days. I know Brian has a number of trees that he wants planted. That may be a great day to get out and plant some trees. Earth Day. Really, it can be any time of the year, though. I think that's also part of the appeal of these work parties, is that it gets the community out on the trails, maybe on times that they wouldn't normally get out there. So, don't say no to a winter work party if you can find one of those that works. Yeah,
Matt, who will participate in this event, are they mostly in Newberg, or they're coming from the town around,
Yeah.
like Woodburn, Wilsonville?
Yeah, so the question is, where do people come from for these work parties? It's really all over the place. Newberg, especially with Riley Park, that is a huge draw from Sherwood, from Wilsonville, from Newberg, and even beyond. So we found, folks that were joining us from there. And when we're looking at other work parties in town, that's more generally local folks, because those are smaller parks. The outside world may not be so familiar with some of those. But yeah, it really is the whole surrounding area that comes to these. Yeah, Bob.
One additional question. What do you think of the idea, I didn't know if you may have done this before, of actually having signage in the parking lot if you're planning a specific trail day, and a contact they can reach out to, get on a list, and we can sort of keep them informed. Is that something that you've tried?
Yeah, we did that, I think, for one of our events at Ewing Young. It was more of just a hike and an awareness thing for the community. And, so I think that's definitely something you want to check with park staff to see, if they're okay with that and what signs they want up. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in our next section when we talk about signage and signage standards. But yeah, getting the word out is a big part of it. You want to do that through your personal network. You're also, putting up some signs and posters around the community would be helpful. One thing that our group did is we were a fairly regular attendee to the farmers market. One of our members, Cindy Riggs, was there almost every week for the farmers market, kind of spreading news about what trails are available in the community. Also, just letting them know, yeah, we're organizing some work parties and things like that.
Matt, do you mean she had a table at the farmer's market? With,
She kind of bummed a corner of the tent off of CPRD, I think, was how we did that, and then passed out some of the trail maps and things to people, trail brochures. I think I picked the day that was 95 degrees, if I remember correctly. Try to block it from my memory.
Seemed like there were a lot of those.
Any other questions? I guess the last thing I would add, there are a couple of other groups and, both formal nonprofits and some informal groups that may organize things. A lot of those groups would probably just approach Brian or park staff to get those things organized. So, over time, I think you'll become more aware of some of those. But, they're great resources too. If you can kind of get a little synergy going between different groups and, tap into their network and your network and get more people out, I think that's always beneficial.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, for the next item on the agenda, for our last two meetings, our organizing was our first meeting. And then we started talking about signage and things at our last meeting. And then, thanks to Matt, it came to our attention that a lot of things we were talking about at that last meeting had been accomplished by the previous Trails Committee. So I asked Matt to come and just give us a little bit of background on that. And we have, I believe we have the trail standards printed out. If you guys haven't printed them out, I know we shared them with you.
Thank you. Oh, thanks, I've seen this before.
Frankly, I was kind of blown away by seeing those standards after our discussions. I was wondering how we as a group were going to try to come up with something like that, and I was very grateful to see that it's been done. So, Matt.
Well, yeah, I think, Richard, are we ready with some slides? Can we see those? Oh, thank you very much, Richard. Well, first, I will apologize partially on behalf of Alan and myself, because we've been doing this for 3 years. And so if we forget something or miss something, it's simply because it was 3 years. And so, I'm sure we'll circle around and add more information as we go. But I think Alan did a great job giving just kind of a general overview of some of the big, exciting things that are kind of right within reach for you guys. Certainly, there's lots of background information that may help inform you as you go on. And I think I would speak for most of the committee members that we would, we're all happy to come in and share some information with you. So whenever you feel that that's appropriate, feel free to ask. Hopefully you'll see me again, and I'm here as a resource for you for that. So just want to set that clear. We're going to start from the big picture here and then zoom in. So tonight I'm going to share just two overarching observations I've had about the Trail Committee and our work over the past 3 years. Going to give you some general guidance for how to approach some of these projects. Then we're going to dive into wayfinding, signage. We'll get into some of the details. And then I'm going to leave you with some resources at the end for further reading and your research as you kind of move along. So first up, go ahead, Richard, with the next slide, please. First up, I'm going to start with 2 observations. And next, Richard. The first big observation is that the community values trails. And I think the clearest evidence of that is that you all are here in this room, right? You're here because you're passionate about trails. We've also had a huge, large turnout at trail volunteer events, and there's been a lot of frequent and passionate public comment at both our committee meetings as well as the board meetings. And then finally, we got the trail survey that we did about a year or so ago, and the trail survey shows that, you know, the community really does support trails, and we had that data to back that up, and that was an important part of what our committee did. So, you know, 80% visit trails, 87 think the trails are important. We've got 80% of the feel that the benefits of trails outweigh the concerns. 81% support more trails. And then, interestingly enough, about half would pay up to $50 per year for development of trails. So they're not only just saying, yeah, we like trails, but they're willing to put some money behind it, at least in that survey shows that. So the next observation that kind of is the flip side to this, go ahead, Richard, that trails take time. As an example, Ewing Young was purchased in 1972, and we're still working on getting approval to access the other side of the park and add some trails. So that's, for those of you without your calculators handy, that's 53 years that we've been working on getting that project completed. So I say that mainly to emphasize to you that these things do take time. Don't take it personally, and don't lose hope. Because really what we're doing here on this committee is we're planting those little acorns that are going to grow into oaks for the next generation. And these things take time. So don't get discouraged. Keep your spirits up. You may hit a little road bump along the way, and I just want to give you that support from the get-go. Hopefully you won't, but just you've got that support. The other thing as far as time is that for every hour of a committee meeting, there's probably 10 or 20 hours that some of you are going to put in on reading, researching, writing up proposals. There's a lot of outside work that needs to get done. So just that's the time component of it. So next, I just want to give you 3 just general bits of guidance. You can take them for what they're worth. I'm just a guy, so test them out against your own experiences in work and in life and see if they fit. The first one, as you are approaching projects, is to start small. There's that old dad joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's like that with any of the projects you guys are going to be working on. So start small, find some little small things you can do. As an action to this item, I would recommend that you talk with staff, identify a small project where you can score an early and an easy win. Ewing Young, the Getman Loop, Shad Park, maybe Crabtree, those might all be good places to kind of get your toes wet, especially when we start looking at signage, before you take the big leap into Riley, because that's a big project, and we'll talk about that when we get into the details. So a bit of guidance, start small. Second is plan slow to go fast. It takes some time at the start to understand the goals, the challenges, the background of the situation. And if I were to rewind 3 years, it would be to apply this more to our group. I think we moved forward kind of rapidly and maybe a little haphazard way at the beginning because we had this urge to do something and get some things done. I would fight that urge to some extent. It will eventually, I think, save you time in the long run because you'll be able to act more swiftly and with more confidence once you've got to fully understand the situation, you've got a plan, right? So the action on that for you guys would be to ask lots of questions, to read, to look outside of CPRD at other park districts, talk to previous committee members like you're doing now, involve your network in the community, and dig deep into all of CPRD's records. You know, there's lots of master plans and lots of things in minutes that can inform your decisions. So take some time to do that kind of groundwork because it really does save you time in the long run. It isn't a waste. The next item is to know when to go to a pro. And I already mentioned it with our trail volunteer work. Your first line of professionals to go to is the CPRD staff. They're a passionate and knowledgeable and talented group, and I've always found them on every instance to be extremely helpful. So lean on them first. But I would also say, with that being said, that there may be times when it pays for CPRD to pay for an expert from outside. And you may have that with some of the projects you're looking at now. Maybe the board's already decided they're going to bring in someone to do a master plan. They don't expect you to do a full-blown master plan for something. Or maybe you've identified something with staff where they may need some extra help. So I think the action there is to, again, inquire with staff, check with them, see if there are things where they need some additional help. And then it's your job to advocate in a way on behalf of that staff to get that funding in the budget so that they've got that extra help. Does that make sense? So those are my 3 general guidelines. See if those work for you. I'm sure there's other things, but those really kind of stuck out with me. I thought as I was getting ready for this, what would I tell myself 3 years ago? And those would be 3 things I would share with a past Matt. So with that, let's move on to the actual wayfinding, which is the more general term for maps and information and signage. And you've already hopefully taken a little look at the recommendations. You know, I think the very first most important central piece of wayfinding, as you've already identified, is a user-friendly map. So we need those. The current map, which you guys have already kind of looked at your last meeting, the current map comes from a trail inventory and mapping project that was completed in 2023. So our board kind of identified that, gosh, we don't even know what trails we have, how long they are, what their conditions are. And so we made that recommendation to the board to hire an intern who happened to be our chair of the committee to work on this project, Quinton. You may have heard his name. This map was never really intended to be a final, user-friendly map, right? It was just kind of a temporary thing, more to inform the master plan and an eventual map designer. Thanks, Richard. The trail inventory identified 108 unique trail segments, for example, up at Riley. That's a lot. And it includes about 20 maps. There's a big 3 pages of that multicolored chart that you see there. And those detail everything from the width of the trail to the height of the canopy above the trail, to the surface of the trail, to the elevation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of details in that mapping project. And I think as far as an action goes for this, I would really encourage as many of you as possible to review that information and then maybe gather some additional information so you can start to draft work on drafting a map, but also drafting some content. Because that's another part that we need is giving some general information about the trails. So we'll talk more here in a second about where that content will go, but it could, for example, go in signage, could go on brochures, on a website. There's lots of trail apps that have maps on them. Those are all things where you could put that content. We started down that path about a year or so ago, working on that, and we had a couple little confusing things happen with some committee rules, so we weren't able to move forward with some of our volunteer work. We kind of had to put a stop on that. So sorry to leave some of that in your lap, but we were hoping to get a little further along with that. Danna, you have a question?
Yeah, so you did the work, was it in 22 to publish it in 23? I mean, all that back,
yeah, I
all
think
the mapping and everything.
I think the trails were
Okay.
were assessed in
22.
22, which brings up an interesting point.
I was
Things
gonna
have
say-
changed up
I
at
was gonna
Riley.
say things of, growth, height, width,
Yep.
did you get all the new trails that Russ had actually done up there?
Not all, and in
Okay,
fact,
so there's some things that we.
on this map right here that you're looking at, you can see the 3 parking areas. To the left is the west side where horse trailers are able to get in. The corner there is Bob's Corner, and the right is the farmhouse. The purple line that I've drawn in there isn't technically maybe a trail, it's a fence line, but a lot of people use it as a trail. And so that wasn't cataloged. There's some new trails. There are some user-created trails throughout the park. Some of those were cataloged and probably need decommissioned. Others maybe are going to turn into trails. And so, again, this was a snapshot in time of 2022-23 to serve as kind of a basis for that master planning and future mapping projects.
Matt, what are
Yeah.
the numbers signifier those trails, individual trail segments?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, we've got the 108 sections. This shows you some of the numbers on there. Those are all the individual segments. And you'll notice, for example, very, very bottom, you'll see 1, 2, and 3. 2 is just a little small, I call it an appendix, but it's a spur trail that just goes off and lands you right at the property line. Maybe that's a candidate to not be a trail at all, right? Some of those numbers could be combined and need to be combined. So that's an action that needs to be taken, which would be combining these trail segments into more logical grouping of numbers. 108 is a lot of trails for people to navigate in their head and figure out. If you're giving someone directions, oh, well, you follow the 1, and which turns into the 3, which turns into the 14, and then that turns into the 10. It's going to get confusing pretty quick. So that's an action that needs to be taken. And my recommendation to you, unsolicited, so take it for what it's worth, is that there's a big difference in trail mapping of a simple loop than something with 108 segments and 60, 70 some intersections and junctions. I think the simple loop, like Shad, Ewing Young, Crabtree's a quarter mile, right? We don't need to hire an outside person to do that. All those things can be done internally. But when we're looking at Riley, you may want to make a recommendation to hire a professional. I mean, there's such things as cartographers and trail designers that do this. And if I remember correctly, again, 2 years ago, I think the general sentiment from our committee was that these things would serve as a basis, and maybe out of the master planning process, this would be developed, right? And that didn't come to fruition. So it's one of those things that kind of needs to be taken over the finish line, is getting that map done. Any questions about that? That's a big action. It's a big project. I know a lot about trails, I think, maybe not a lot. I know a little more about trails than your average person, I'll say that, okay? I would not feel comfortable personally taking this on as a committee.
I do have questions, but I don't know is appropriate for this one or not, because if this trail become, let's call labeled with the signage, I'm talking about parking. Let's say get popular, and do we have enough parking spot?
Yeah, there's all of these things. That's one of the other challenges, I think, for a committee, right? You don't hold the purse strings. You don't really call any shots. And so you need to make some recommendations and also be aware of all the other moving parts. And in many ways, you're going to know, certainly within the next few months to a year, you're going to know more about our trails than maybe anyone with the exception of Brian here. And that includes the board, because the board has so many things going on. So, but you need to rely on the board to figure out what the other moving parts are that you interface with. So parking is one of those. They've got a master plan for that. Presumably they'll be coming up with a budget for that. And hopefully they won't have to wait 53 years like we are with Ewing Young to get that done, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that kind of can create speed bumps, I guess. Yeah.
One more question, Matt. Is this particular document available? With that map in particular, I think that'd be a really good tool for us to have.
Yeah,
That's the best I've seen so far.
Yes, and I'll cover this. I've got a list of resources, and I will get those sent out to your secretary to links to those, so you can actually download those all yourself. But I'll list them and briefly kind of go over those. But the maps are certainly a resource you want to become familiar with. So, yeah.
I had a question too. All the work that you did on the trail committee in the last 2 years, is there somewhere at CPRD that those are housed?
Absolutely.
SharePoint site?
They are.
Okay.
If you go to your committee page, now,
So all the work that you did,
Yeah. To me, the trail committee is the trail committee. It's like the board is the board, right? We just have new members, right? But they've made a split there between the old committee and the new committee.
yeah.
If you go to your webpage for your committee, there's a button right at the top that clicks over to our stuff.
Okay.
And one of the things on that list will be the mapping project. I don't know that the other parks mapping project is up there for some other reason, but that'd be something to maybe touch base with Kat to see if those things could be added.
When I looked, I just didn't feel like there was everything that you've done, so that's why I was asking the
Yeah,
question.
pretty much everything should be
Okay.
up there. Yeah, any minutes, agendas,
Seemed to be a little hit or
recommendations.
miss, I thought, when I
Yeah.
was trying
Yeah.
to search it.
Yeah. If you see something missing, reach out to me,
Reach
reach out to, maybe Quentin. I know I've got a big folder where I've dumped lots of CPRD stuff, so happy to sort through those, and if it didn't get up online, we can certainly find it. So yeah, making this simpler, I think, is a big action. And in checking in with Brian to see, Brian and the rest of CPRD to see, is there someone on staff who feels comfortable handling this, or do you really need some extra help? If you really need some extra help, then that falls on you guys to write up some sort of proposal and recommendation to the board and find the money to make that happen. Make sense? So beyond a map being your central component, and all that information that has been already done through the assessment there of our trails, the other thing I think you're going to need before you leap into this is some sort of plan, right? And that's the who, what, when, where, why, how many, et cetera, of the project. So, for example, in this graphic here kind of shows you a simple version of what the Forest Service uses in their plan. And they've got a database and a spreadsheet. This, what you're looking at there, is telling you exactly what needs to be on a sign at a junction. There's another column that gives you the exact location, GPS-wise, where that needs to be. And it also tells you, oh, this is a wilderness. It's a little blurred out. It says this is a wilderness sign. And on wilderness signs, we don't use paint. So it's just a wooden sign. So you're going to need some sort of spreadsheet or database that tracks this. And I would work with staff, and hopefully your new superintendent can be of some help with his project management background, I believe. But knowing where the location is, and it's not just like, oh, well, it's at this intersection. Well, which corner of that intersection? Is it on the right side, the left side, north, south, east, west? How far off the trail? How deep does it go? These are all details that you're going to want to work out, especially before you send some volunteers out there to do that. What information is going to be on the sign? The Forest Service actually has a document, I'll share that with you here at the end, that describes what order they put these things in on a sign. And where are the arrows aligned on the sign, for example? How big does the lettering have to be? And we leaned a lot on that just because the Forest Service is the big dog as far as trails go in the country. They put a lot of resources into researching all this stuff, and we didn't see a point spending money to reinvent the wheel as a park district. But along with that plan, you're going to want to have your you're going to want to probably know who's going to install it, when they're going to install it, and track the status. So this is a planned sign. We've actually located where the sign's going to be, maybe with a stake driven first, and then someone double checks that, and then you finally get this thing driven, 2 or 3 feet deep into the ground. There's only one thing that's more work than driving one of these things into the ground. And that's driving it into the ground, digging it back out, and then driving it back in the ground somewhere else. So the planning stuff is not something you want to skip over. Okay? Any questions about kind of a plan? Richard, can we skip back to project management? That plan, I think, eventually could turn into some sort of project tracking system for you. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, signs are going to go missing, they're going to get broken, they're going to get faded. And so we need some way, long-term, to track every one of these signs. There's 700 some signs, I think, total. We could easily be over 1,000 signs across the district. So we need to know where those signs are, what's supposed to be on them. If it goes missing, how do you know to create the next one? You know, you don't want to go through all that planning work all over again. You want to just look in the system and say, well, it says that this is what that sign was. Yeah.
Question, and this may be for Brian and Matt. Does the district already have some sort of asset management tracking software, capital asset tracking, anything along those lines?
I apologize, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Does the district have any asset management software either for capital assets or even for smaller things like IT assets or signage?
I believe we do.
Okay.
I don't know the particular
Ins and outs.
brand or whatever we use, but I think it's used,
Okay.
definitely in budgeting and such.
Yeah, and I don't know, depending on that system, another thing that you may want to become familiar with is GIS systems that overlay this information, location information about signs onto a map. So you know, okay, well, along this route, there should be 10 signs, and you can click in and see the details of those signs, the status of them. But you're going to want to know, you know, is this an installed sign? Is it damaged? Things like that. Do we need to replace it? So yeah, any questions about that signage plan? And
Well, actually, a question for Brian. Do you have a plan now? Because you have signs throughout the Parks District. So how do you manage the current signage that you have?
That has been, it's kind of, archaic is probably not the right word, but they're standard in over 40 years of a district, they've evolved, right? And this is the next evolution. There's an example there at the Ewing Young Trail sign. But any given park or trail or facility, there's general park rules. There's 3 or 4 or 5 different signs, and depending on the area and what would pertain. Areas where there might be pets or animals or different user groups, and that might be a different line item on there too. But that's about as far as we've gone. So we're at an exciting point, definitely with, like Matt emphasized, designing a map. Like we've all been to different places, and these GIS maps are wonderful, and all that information that's on there, and that's great. I want to be able to be dropped in the middle of Riley property or Ewing Young or anywhere and feel comfortable looking at something and going, hey, I could get out of here. This is really cool. No big deal. Nothing can happen that I can't, relax or whatever. So I think to provide that, and we've seen it in different, throughout the country or anywhere you go.
So you probably want us to build on what you already have in place. I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we would probably just need to have a better understanding of what you have in place now.
Right, so we've elevated even with the park rule signs, so we're going more to what the U.S. Forest Service uses, to be consistent with that branding. So I think that's important. I would encourage any group moving forward that we stay with that. And then obviously there's the cost savings and everything else too, that we're not constantly changing our branding or whatever. They're very recognizable, so we fit right into, hey, really, this is CPRD, cool, they know their stuff type deal or whatever. They fit in with any national park. And then from there, yeah, just emphasizing that it might take an outside source, or to limit when we look at, all these trails with these segments and everywhere they're going, that we might want to simplify it. We know we could put 1,000,000 trails up at the Riley property, no matter what, and people are going to create their own occasionally or whatever. But maybe initially, you guys know, that have more experience riding up there than I do, there's certain ones that you use all the time, that walkers, the different user groups can use. And horse riders.
You can make it easier.
Eliminate, like Matt said, that 118 segments. I think we could easily reduce that, and then we could go to either someone else, or we go for outside resources. I don't know if we can do it internally, and then that user-friendly design that we're looking for, and then we could use that throughout the district. And then not to steal Matt's thunder, I think he's going to encourage us that maybe we start at Ewing Young when it comes to doing the sign markers, the certain stickers, and the certain things we want to put on them. At the same time, not to slow down or abandon what we're doing up at Riley property, because it is so big, we don't want to stop that either. Yeah. But at the same time, maybe we have some resources helping us redesign how we're gonna, with input from everybody, what we want to see up there.
Why don't you just hold that thought, Brian? You're up next on the agenda, so
Oh,
we're gonna get into more discussions there.
So yeah, I echo what Brian said. The most important thing on trail signage, I think, is safety first, and that means for most people, how the heck do I get out of here? and how far is it? You know, which direction do I go and how far? And especially when they come to an intersection, if I go right, I'm adding 5 miles. If I go left, it's half a mile down the road. Those kind of things you're going to want to identify. And I would hope that a designer or cartographer, if they're helping you with a map, could then help you with developing a plan, could help tell you exactly what needs to be on the signs and give you some criteria for how to, down the road, not necessarily call on them, but go through this checklist, and this will tell you this is what shows up at the top of the sign. This is what, you know, this is the priority. If you come to 4 trails, which one's the first on the list? Is it the shortest, the longest, the one that's north, the one that's south? And the Forest Service, again, in those documents I'm going to share with you, has that pretty well laid out. They've got quite a robust system for this. So, Richard, just get us back on track, the adopted signage standards. And the next one, please. So the board approved, or I should say the committee recommended to the board a number of options for signage. And the way we came about that is researching what other folks were doing, also with an eye toward the size of CPRD. So CPRD is not Metro, CPRD is not even Bend Parks and Rec, has a different budget. And so what would be feasible within a budget? So we had that discussion as we came up with these. Also, what would users be most comfortable with? Now, that being said, that's our recommendation. The board then approved that. And so it's an approved trail standard. Now, I think Matt has pointed out to you guys that you're not beholden to these things. Anything that we've done as a committee, you're not beholden to that. You can change your mind. You can say, you know, we've got better information than the previous group, and we want to go a different direction. And then it's up to you to convince the board to adopt a new standard. So that's your prerogative. That's your committee business, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I have a question, and this is probably for Brian, but I mean, is there a standard now, Brian, when you were talking about what's in place today?
For signage?
Yes.
There is. It's pretty consistent, but it's not basic's the right word, but it's just limited. I mean, we have very little signage actually that in terms of throughout the park district. We have park rules, maybe some advisory things in terms of, you know, please keep your dog on leash, that type of thing. Maybe that's not the right word. That's about it. And then anything, if we had grants, you know, and stuff like that, recognizing that. Mm-hmm. So it is really limited. So, and then maybe if it's a trail, we have a map. And then if it's a disc park, we have, you know, the layout of that also.
So I guess the question is it of interest to the staff and the board to broaden those standards, right?
Well, the board did adopt these standards at a meeting.
So what, for instance, what do you, like?
I'm just saying.
What would be an example of that?
Yeah, so I guess I'm
Microphone?
sorry.
Oh, your turn on.
I'm jumping ahead instead of going back because, and maybe my first question is, I understood that signs were already ordered. Do we have?
So I can help answer that question.
Okay.
So what I did in this current budget we're in, knowing that we're moving forward and doing wonderful things, that we want to start signing things, is I made the initial purchase based on this master plan, and then some, a little bit. The funding was approved by the last board in the budget committee. We have 700, well, I can read the exact one, 700 of the dual flex fiber marker posts. That's more than enough to do Riley. And then we could actually do, you know, Yu and Young and such. And then the anchors that go on them too. So that's a big expense. So they all have that and they're attached.
Yeah,
We
great.
have the post pounder, we have the pilot hole digger.
So that was sort of my question. Is
Yeah,
that
we're at that point.
I feel like we're spending a lot of time talking about things that have already been adopted and have already been purchased.
Well, but
So I'm just wondering.
But we haven't purchased any of the, what I did is just for whatever and giggles, ordered one of
Just
half of what's
samples,
available
yeah.
for stickers.
Okay.
That you could put on here. And like Matt's alluding to, there are standards. You know, I could see us having maybe CPRD's logo at the top.
Yeah.
And then from there down, whatever proper orders you have. You know, you have the horse before the walker or the whatever, the dog. Or whatever. But, and then yeah, there's so much cool information you can put on these things, you know, even when they're 18 inches buried in the ground. So none of that's been adopted. So that's a huge piece, right? So if we as a group or with all this expertise here, go, okay, even on a smaller scale viewing where we're gonna have maybe 50 of these there or whatever, I'm just throwing a number out. On every one of those, we wanna have blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's a start. Okay, and then with that in mind, okay, we know for sure we're gonna, so many of those match up to what we wanna do at Riley or whatever, then let's get those ordered at the same, you know, in gross or whatever. And
Okay.
so there's the opportunity to expand our signage. As far as a district-wide policy and whatever sign, we're at the point where it's pretty limited. It serves its purpose. You know, every park has park rules and like I said, you know, whatever. But as far as this is cool. It's all new to us. So we're at a good point, a good junction. We've got a lot of momentum. I think there's a lot of support. At the board level and everything else, so, you know, yeah, let's go. But I mean, that's the problem, we don't wanna just let's go, like Matt said.
So at this point, we haven't yet ordered the wayfinding signs,
No,
the
so
maps
any of that,
and
like
that
the
kind of stuff.
kiosk
So
and the
that's
big, see, this is where we really, that would be one of the, and maybe I am jumping ahead, first punch items I would do. Is like Matt kept mentioning, we gotta figure out what kind of simplified maps we want for all the trails. You know, the 3 or 4 or whatever we wanna do right away. Obviously Riley's the most extensive. That's a huge piece. But once that's established, and then we get that, there's your big sign when you pull into the parking lot, right? Yeah. And then we have smaller versions at each trailhead, or, you know, we decide how we're gonna do that. And at each junction, we've got something, you know, whatever. And then we can make maps off of that, but I think that's a huge thing. And then there's some examples that Matt can mention that we could do right away up at Riley, just to make people feel more comfortable and stuff like that, that we could put on some stuff.
Yeah, I think the signage issue is one of those examples of go slow or plan slow to go fast. Again, it's if you're and our former committee members had the same issue starting off. Is like we all come with our passions for a specific park or trail or whatever. Or I'm interested in kayaking or biking or taking a step back and assessing some background information is really going to help you propel yourself much more quickly. You're not going to spin your wheels wasting time. We spent a lot of time in our committee, and Alan will attest to this, maybe almost a year, kind of, if you slow down and you kind of are a little more deliberate with things, do your research. It takes a lot of reading. I mean, some of these documents are not, they'll put you to sleep
Start
real
simple.
quick, right?
You have to start
Yeah.
simple too.
And start simple. Yeah,
You know, and before you know it, you'll eat the elephant, right?
exactly.
So you just have
Yeah.
to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's, just to move things along, if we could just wrap up.
Awesome.
that,
I will wrap
and then
up.
we're gonna put Brian on the hot seat for
Okay.
a little bit.
This is what the board adopted. It's a kiosk sign, which can be more elaborate depending on the park and the budget. The signs in the middle are exactly what you see in front of you that Brian ordered, and then the metal signs, which you see on the table over here to my right. So I think pretty much CPRD is doing that, right? And that was one of the things we looked at when we were designing the standard is, well, what are they doing now? And, we don't want to throw everything in a lurch. Let's just keep things aligned so that we can move things forward, as speedily as possible. Next slide. This is one that Brian just put up fairly recently, and his crew. New signage up at Ewing Young. It's great. Much improvement over the previous signs that were a little small and hard to read. Got the brochures there. Tells you how long the trail is. So these things are slowly being implemented, and if you got some more volunteers out there, maybe you could put a couple brown signs, or maybe one more of these type of intersection or junction signs at a key junction point at the trail. So moving along, I'm going to wrap up with I'm going to speed read through some resources, and I got a lot of them. I'll send them to you, hopefully with a little bit of text explaining it, but the first one of those is you need to find the Heritage Trail strategic and master plans. There's actually 2 plans related to trails district-wide. Check those out. Check out the CPRD district master plan. We'll definitely include a section on trails in there. Then, of course, there's park-specific plans. So depending on where you're working, you want to be familiar with those. Just for general information, the Community Trail Survey, there are actually 2 of them. One was commissioned a year or 2 before the most recent, and was run in a different way. So you'll want to check those out. The trail inventory and mapping, I talked about that, and you're keyed into that. Also look through that committee webpage. We've got our recommendations up there, agendas, minutes, and then the CPRD board agendas and minutes. The tricky thing you're going to find when you get to those last 2 is that there is no comprehensive place that I know of where all of CPRD's policies or adopted stuff is cataloged and indexed. So it's a matter of digging through month by month, year by year, all the way back to 1968, is that right? To find that stuff. And I've done a little bit of that. As time goes on, I'm happy to point you in the direction of some of those resources specifically. But those are all internal CPRD things. My second slide here, Richard, is some outside resources. The USDA, which oversees the Forest Service, has a sign and poster guidelines for Forest Service EM 7100-15 document. The document is 681 pages. I'm saving you the trouble of reading the first several hundred. You can skip right to chapter 5, and that has all kinds of information about trail signage specific to what we're wanting and needing to do. The second item on there is a really super and also local resource, which is Access Recreation. And I had the privilege of going on a workshop a couple years ago out in the field with the woman who founded this. She's in an electric wheelchair, and she showed us some of the difficulties that people with disabilities have. And the places she can go in that type of wheelchair is amazing. So don't write off some of our rugged trails for folks with disabilities just because they're rugged trails. They can get around to those things. But what they need to be able to do that safely is good information. And so her organization that she spearheaded, a group of various organizations, has these guidelines that help with kind of a checklist of the type of information you might want to have on a website before someone goes out to the trail. And it helps people with disabilities, but it also helps mom who's taken the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old with a stroller out. It really helps everybody to have good information. And so that's a great resource. There's a whole document on that you can kind of read through. Also, you'll want to take a look and be familiar with the Intertwine Regional Trail Signage Guidelines. Intertwine is organized by Metro, and it reaches from Vancouver to the outskirts of Portland. We're not in that, but trails are more valuable when they're connected. And so being familiar with their guidelines and how to connect to those might be something helpful as you move forward with this. And I'm going to give you one last little bunch of them. And these are other park and recreation districts. So Tualatin Hills, our neighbor, which you're familiar with, they've got their signage standards up online. Might be helpful to look at that. And I say look at these not necessarily to develop more standards, but you may be able to glean some procedures or a checklist from some of these that are going to be helpful as you plan things. So I've got Tualatin Hills, Bend is another big one, Portland Park System. The last one, San Jose, not in Oregon. They've got this great, and I'll cite it specifically when I send you out the links. Page 14, Appendix E, has this cohesive program for planning, installing, and documenting the milestones of a trail. So if you're looking at 12, 13, 14 miles up at Riley, well, where do you start those mileages? How far apart do you document those things? So they've got a whole checklist and procedure that whoever designed that handed over to them. Why pay for it if it's out there freely available at some other government agencies, in my opinion. So with that, I'm done. What other questions do you have for me?
It's awesome, Matt, thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. And thank you again, guys, for
Yeah,
stepping
no,
up.
really
Appreciate it.
appreciate all the work you guys have done. Up next is Brian, and we've already kind of waded into it a little bit. At our last meeting, we were really wondering, where is the district at on the signage projects? And also, what can we do to assist you? specific needs that the district might have.
So hopefully, did I give some clarity to where we're at? You know, we're at the starting point when it comes to trails, basically, or the evolution of signing of any of our trails, which is super exciting. And that started several years ago with even, you know, the first committee that was formed, and you guys are carrying that torch, and that's wonderful. Because that's motivating the district, and with all this knowledge and people at the table. How can you help just by what we're doing here? And so this, I am totally open to, obviously I'm one person working at a park district, very fortunate, and get to, you know, do all the cool stuff that we do here and help them implement that stuff on behalf of community members like myself and all of you. So these committees, your committee is super valuable based on, I don't know what kind of effort you want to help put into that. I guess, I don't know the best way to say that. So if we could work together, or obviously internally, I can run with this, but I'm totally open to, my feelings don't get hurt easy at all or ever in terms of people offering their experience and wanting to help. So if we all came to a consensus today that, okay, one good starting point, and I can mention a couple of them, would be we've taken out of this, is we need to design a friendly map and decide what we want a map to be. So when it comes to Riley, you know, sure, we can design a map, but we need everybody's input here, and I think with these people, you guys should take front and center to that as users of this more than anybody in the community. What do you want to see these loops look like? What do you want to see the trails look like? Do we want to, you know, is it as simple as this, and we'll no segments off of this to start with or something? And then we can maybe take that to somebody or look at these other resources of people that have designed maps for, you know, different trail systems throughout the state or the country or what have you, and work with that. That would be one alternative.
So what I'm hearing from you, Brian, is like maybe one of our first ways to try to look at Riley is as a committee or subcommittees to really look at that map and decide which trails do we really want to be trails, and are there any that we want to disappear? And determine that before we start talking about a map, we really want to know what's going to be there in the future. And, you know, I know walking with Bob and just our little walk, there were some segments that I think are probably on that map that were decommissioned, but they're still showing up on the map, so we got to get those off. So we really have to truth that red line map that we have now of what are we going to do as far as trying to assign these.
I agree.
And then probably go to a cartographer, trail mapping person to design the map for the sign at that
That's a
point.
pretty big
sounds
And
job.
that's a big job, that's
I
a
mean,
lot of miles.
That's a big job to like decide which ones are gonna be decommissioned. Maybe they're just overgrown now because Russ isn't there. So
Yeah, and
I
I'm
feel
not-
like more of a, just if we could start to do simple loops.
The
within
large
the map.
loops, you
Yeah.
know, like you've got around the fields. We know that's a cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm-
that's my thought too. That's a separate project, I think, deciding
I-
which trails should be shut down or decommissioned. I think if we want to focus on signage, it's which main trails do we want
Yeah.
to sign, and whether there's loops off of it, which there are up there, like, that's to be dealt with later, but just sort of,
But we're gonna need wayfinding signs.
totally,
right?
yeah.
So how do you,
But I just, what I'm saying, what I think I'm envisioning is that we don't necessarily tackle what trails are gonna stay and what trails are gonna go, but we assess which trails we know are permanent, you know, trails, the main trails, and that's what we talk about for signage at this phase.
Yeah, I think we have to do it in phases.
We have to do it in phases, and then after that, after we have because that could take a year.
More than that.
Yeah, or more. And
okay.
then later we say,
So-
oh, this trail is probably the next most used trail, and then we have a phase
that would
two.
be multiple productions of sign maps that are expensive.
Right, so maybe partially to accomplish that, if I'm hearing correctly, and this might be an alternative, is we could at least do on the main loops right now, decide which of those are gonna be. Don't even pay attention to segments or any sub-trails. And we could put out the sign markers, the trail markers. With agreed upon information, the basic stickers that we need on those. that a person could come up, and we could still have this map right here, or whatever, or we could design something similar. We could number this, that's affordable and stuff like that, without creating a big Wayfarer signs yet. And/or we could do, affordable, smaller versions. But just have, okay, this is the number 1 trail, and what we're gonna do with that one is, we could start putting the markers out there, and it says number 1, it has the basic information on whatever we want it to say, the 4 different stickers, 6 different stickers. Then I feel comfortable, I come to that, I'm at the trailhead there, I've got a basic map, or, a wayfinder sign. And we don't have to spend, the $300 one yet, or whatever, but there are even if we change it out 5 times or something, it's still, as we evolve or whatever, maybe that would work. And then people are comfortable at least going to parking at the farmhouse, they see the big trail sign there, and they go, okay, that's trail number 1, it's on the old art loop or what have you. And as we approach 150 feet down the road, whoop, there's another one of those signs. I know I'm on trail number 1 still and feeling comfortable about it, and I've got my basic, that's a thought. Maybe we could do that initially.
I'm curious, with all 108 segments or whatever the number
Yeah.
was, are they all being maintained the same way? Can we just be prioritizing what's being maintained? Just like you're saying, Brian, I'm sure it's the loops, but there might be some other small areas that are maintained regularly, but I don't know how you guys maintain such a
The
huge
ones that are
area.
most used, obviously, are helping maintain themselves,
Sure.
right?
Right.
So the users are dictating that right now, so that's a good starting point, in my opinion, is to, we know for a fact that those are being used. Sure, there's offshoots that more experienced people that know the property are doing their thing, and that's cool.
And I was gonna say, when we initially, I was one of the people that built the trails for Crystal Riley Park. So initially, they were just these little easy, around the fields. They were easy loops, and I think we can go back to some of that, along with the work that Russ was doing, and then also the people are using the main trails. So I think it's not as hard as we maybe think it is.
Just a couple of thoughts is, I think Matt brought this, when you talked about the segments, I think at some point combining them, because you could have a loop around one field is a trail.
Right.
Not 14 segments, but a single trail to simplify it. And one other thing is, and I know it's only January now, but I really sort of have this thing where I'd love to see at least some of the basic signage in by the beginning of summer where people are heavily using the park again. I go up there now in the morning, I see maybe half a dozen people. Go up there on a weekend in the summer, you'll see 30 or 40 people.
Sure.
It's a whole different thing.
Right.
But I'd like to have that in place, at least a basic system in place by summertime, if that's at all feasible.
And it would be easy to dig
Hey, Dana,
by then. It would be easy to dig by then, too.
can you tap your microphone real fast?
Can you not hear me at all?
You're really quiet. I found out you're on a different channel than I thought you were on.
Oh, that's probably a good thing.
Good. Sorry about that.
It's probably a good thing.
You're good now, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
Matt?
Unsolicited, just some unsolicited thoughts. So again, you guys, it's your work to figure this stuff out. If it were me, I would probably be advocating for prioritizing, start with a small park or trail first, because then you get to use the equipment.
We can't hear my map. Sorry.
That was just a test for you, Richard. Thanks. Yeah, if this is unsolicited, but if I were in your shoes, I might be advocating for starting at a smaller park because you'll get to use the equipment. You'll figure out some of the logistics, like what other tools do you need to bring? A shovel? You don't want to start heading out to Riley first. You'll need a map, which you've got fairly easily for some of these other parks that can be designed probably in-house. So you've got some of those first steps of the logistics and the planning that are readily available. It's an easy, quick win for you. Lets you test some things out. And then you, at the conclusion of that, you could then have another discussion, go, are we ready for Riley? What needs to happen? What did we learn from this that needs to happen at Riley? oh, we really do need that map, or, we're just going to go out and put some signs up and see what happens. And that, again, that's totally, between you and staff to figure that out. But I would be advocating for that first. Try something small at a small park. Second, I would assume that you're going to need a map before you start to put up signs, because those signs, they need a map on them. So you need the map first, right? That's kind of your order of operations.
Yeah, I just think we need to balance that with, I agree that starting at a smaller park makes sense, but somehow we need to at least balance that with the community saying that Crystal Riley is where they need the signs, because it is so big and people are intimidated by the size and the difficulty of some of those trails. So I think I think in the perfect world, we're saying, okay, maybe we could at least not finalize the map, but have posts that at least give people a couple loops.
Yep.
Yeah.
And show that there is a way in and out in simple loops, and if they choose to go off the loop, then, they're no worse off than they are today.
Sounds like,
But
Brian, that's what you and your staff are planning on doing, correct?
Well, that's what I'm I'm
That's what
putting
he'd
that
like us
out
to
there.
do.
I think that might be a good thing, and definitely,
Yep.
like by summer or spring, a heavy
Yeah.
use. I think, staff could, do that, in terms of, and we could ask for volunteers too. So
And
we
I-
could work together on that.
yeah,
But it would just be a matter of, because the more you look at it and the more discussion you have, it becomes even more overwhelming. Because we
Right.
start,
for sure.
it's like, I'm like you guys, let's get stuff done. Let's do something, right? Because if we don't, then we just keep, oh, God, well, we need to do this, and then we need to do that. But I don't want to have to Matt's point, you don't want to redo everything either.
Yeah.
Because those anchors that are out there for a reason, and, it's a pain in
Yeah.
the butt to dig them back out.
I do have a question, Brian. I remember for the first two meetings, to put a signage at Bob and Crystal Riley Park is one of the priority that we need to do it. Is that correct? And so, am I correct on that?
I think
That-
it's definitely a priority.
Yeah.
But I think all the other parks are just as warranted too, the other trails.
Got you.
To Matt's point, I'm motivated that staff can go out to Ewing, and that's what we get the training to,
Right.
to do those loops at Ewing and do the stickers or whatever. Basically, we could do that internally, and then we get the experience there. At the same time, though, I'd like to leave here, not necessarily tonight, with marching orders or whatever suggestions on what should we do up at Riley, because it is a priority, because the word is out, and it's a jewel, and more people that discover it are going to come back. And a lot of people, first-time users, it's overwhelming. It's like, gosh, they got this thing, why aren't they? How do they expect people to even get around here? Whatever. So that's on us. So we need the safety thing, right? You are opening your doors to something, a public space. I think it's our responsibility as a district to provide the best experience, let alone safe experience, everything else, and to be able to use it. So by starting, if we can agree that, okay, the main loops, or we could do a sub-meeting or something, that, hey, Brian, these are the ones our riders use all the time, and new people that come up here use all the time. This is the one the mom and the kids are using, all the time, Bob sees or whatever. We could definitely decide, okay, this is gonna be, the Westfield's gonna be #1 trail, this is gonna be #2 trail. Okay, all those markers are gonna have that on there, and we'll decide, okay, these 5 stickers should be on there. And we can at least put those out every 150 yards, or whatever the standard is trail feet, that, people are comfortable. They started out, they're on that #1 trail, yep, there's another one still going, hey, this is fun. I
Brian,
know that if I continue on, even looking at this primitive map, we could redesign these, Kat could do that with me, that we could number them.
Yeah.
So, these little things.
Do you think your staff, are they aware now of what the primary loops are being used?
I think there's
They can
a
do
couple
that.
of us that are, for sure.
We're gonna move on a little bit, to
Sure.
talk about our field trip that
Yeah,
we're doing
let's do that.
next. But if you and your staff could just scratch up one of those maps and then provide it to us maybe at that field trip, and then we can, as a committee, determine, is that the right, I'm looking at you guys mostly, are these the right ones to look at the primaries or not?
I might even bypass that and go right to these folks right here, these 3, 2,
Yeah.
whatever.
I'll help
Yeah.
you.
And they're there every day, so.
Yeah, yeah.
And we could, then we won't be remarking them, but I think that's some good input there, but.
And
I
then
would
in
accept
terms
that
of
challenge.
what Matt was talking about is, looking at a smaller park, maybe we can talk about that when we do our field trip. So let's move on and discuss that. The date was February 7th, and we were starting at 1 PM. Is that correct? Were we meeting here, Brian?
This is I am totally open to the group, what you folks want to do. I'm at your beck and what, so it's a matter of, this is your field trip. So if you
Well, we
can come to
wanted-
some kind of consensus, because I'll just jump to the chase here. Where do you want to go? And what experiences do you want to have? And what would you like to see? Because we could easily go, and I'll just keep rambling on here. We could easily go to Ewing, so between now and then, perhaps staff and I, we could have the markers that we talked about up there. We could have that signed.
They look great, by the way, the new mark, and I did see that you put a UR here
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
one of
So
them.
that helps, yeah.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Well, I have extras, but it's like anything else, that's something we have to realize that the
And I appreciate the dog on
public
leash.
spaces, yeah.
It's only at one of the trailheads, the other two don't have it yet, so I'm hoping that.
We have new ones coming.
Good.
I mean, I would vote for if your staff has time to do it before the field trip, because I think it would be nice to see it up.
Right, I
Yeah.
think we could do that, and then, if
Well, how about if we go to
you want us
Ewing?
to decide, since
To have that
it's a
visual.
trial thing, we could do several different stickers that, we think might pertain to any part, but.
How about if we plan on visiting Ewing Young and then the other local trail needs? And if we do Riley, that's the whole afternoon.
And
So
that's, I'm open to that.
Let's not do Riley this time,
You
but
could
do
do
the
Getman, I'm open to
the
that, you could
local,
do.
and also maybe see the bypass area that we're gonna be talking about more. Does that
Yeah,
sound-
we could definitely do you and Young, and then we could just jaunt over to the trailhead of where, off of 219, where the bypass trail's gonna start.
Yeah,
And that'd give people a good perspective there.
and we'll see how time goes.
So
Sounds
do you,
like a plan.
Just a
Alan?
quick suggestion, we were up the other day and it struck me that there's no sign on the road saying you've arrived at Bottle Crystal Wiley Park. And if you know, when you go park and you look around, you'll see the CPRD logo, and okay, this is it.
No, there's tons of opportunity for that Wayfair signing. Down at the bottom of, Corral Creek, different areas, our Paramount Road, you could put, the directionals, going there, and, there's even opportunities like that going into Ewing. That, some really brand new signage that, can explain what's in there. I mean, you got the wonderful BMX, skate park, dog park, frisbee,
And
and
Riley,
the
I'm
trail.
just talking about the sign that says you've arrived.
Right.
You're here.
I think
That-
there's a short one.
I agree, I think that's all
There's a
part of
couple at the parking lot.
this discussion and master plan, because that parking lot, yeah, it should be real comfortable signage when you pull in it, but I think things are definitely gonna change when we get to that point and do the big giant sign and my vision of a nice vault toilet there or whatever, and, yeah, people a lot more comfortable and they realize, yeah, hey, I'm here.
So let's
So-
back
That's a
on the
very good
field
point.
trip. Are we
so to
meeting
our
here?
field trip, do we want to meet here, or do we
Well,
want to
that's-
meet at
that's-
Ewing Young to start?
That's my question, is how are we gonna do this? Do you
Are
have-
you, individually, you're probably driving to wherever we're going first, be
Okay.
it here or anywhere else?
Yeah,
Let's
And
just
then
meet
do-
at you and Young then at 1. on the
and
panel.
start.
Okay,
Yeah.
So that's a thought, and/or if you came here, we would go to Ewing, but we end up at the bypass trailhead there, and that's right here off of 219.
so you have a van or something that you could take us in?
Yeah, absolutely.
good.
Okay.
Why don't we meet here then?
I'm
We'll
either
start
gonna-
here then?
I'll either shuttle you in a van from
Yeah.
Ewing Young, or shuttle
And
you.
then we can
Yeah.
talk in the van as well, so.
Yeah, we'll just,
Good,
how about
that's
we meet
great.
here?
Yeah.
So here, okay.
Yeah,
Meet here
at 1,
Or,
a little bit before,
okay,
so we can get going at 1.
yeah.
Okay, so what are the next steps? I think that's part of what we've been discussing the entire time here. Next steps would be Brian's going to work on, his staff will come up with the primary loops, maybe along with some of you guys, and we will confirm that. We will be meeting again in February, after our field trip meeting, a week later, that we can maybe just sort of debrief after that and then start looking at a work plan.
What's the date in February, what we're going to meet?
The
next,
the second Tuesday.
Yeah, what's the actual?
11th.
Okay.
Can we talk about the agenda for the 11th
Sure.
also? Do we, we have a couple things, right?
We're going to confirm, we either confirm, well, we can't really confirm in the van because we can't make decisions. So we'll have to make a decision at the meeting.
Just to make sure I have
So-
February 2nd. Okay.
Yeah, at
For the field trip.
Yeah, at 1 o'clock.
So confirming the primary loops will be one agenda item.
Okay.
We probably want to start working on our volunteer day, recruitment. Discuss with Brian what the needs may be, what kind of work are we looking at needing to do. Any other agenda items from the committee?
Not an agenda item, but just a suggestion for the other committee members. And I don't know if people are watching the board meetings online, but I think if you're not, you should be here in person too, just to learn what the board is talking about and what their priorities are.
That actually reminds me of a question, because I know that at the board meetings, there's typically an agenda item for like committee reports. Have we organized who's coming from the committee to do a committee
No.
report?
Is that on every board meeting, Matt, or is it as needed?
It can be every board meeting, but it's once you guys are comfortable with providing reports. So
Yeah.
right now, it's still kind of beginning stages. I'd say for the February meeting, you'll have done a field trip. We kind of know what we're working on now, right? The maps, prioritization, sign standards. And I'd say that would be a really good time to report back to us. So probably at the next meeting on your agenda, I'd say select 1 or 2 people to provide that report. And then obviously tell them what to report. And then working with Richard, if you guys have pictures or information, any of that kind of stuff, that goes a long way to really make a good presentation to the board, so they know what's going on. So.
Just real quick, back on the Trails Day, maybe we can assign sort of who's going to be in charge of PR, who's going to be in charge of equipment, who's going to be, we can
Yep.
get that sorted out next meeting too.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Oh,
Okay, with that, we're adjourned.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, Matt.